long as you love, you will see me in the stars. As you look up at the stars, I will be there.
I'm Monica Charette, and this is Holding the Light.
As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear. Little whispers you will hear. As long as you love.
What would you do if someone you loved experienced the loss of their child? What would you say, seeing them for the first time? Would you rush to their side or wait to give them space? I don't know what to do are familiar words said by loving friends and family who just want to help but don't know how. On this special podcast, we are joined by my friend, Dr. Stephanie Bartholomew, who bravely stepped in when my daughter died to become what I have lovingly termed my grief secretary. We think this conversation is so beneficial to listeners, we've given it 2 episodes. In part 1 this week, we relive the first hours, days, and weeks after Cassidy's sudden death and share how friends gently carried us and our community through the initial shock, the chaos, and the confusion and brain fog of those first days to really provide some practical and, for us, very meaningful ways to help our shattered hearts. Plus, Steph provides some great advice on how to simply just be with someone in their darkest hours. We wish everyone had a grief secretary. Today, Colby and I are holding the light with Stephanie Bartholomew. We're with my friend, Dr. Stephanie Bartholomew, who I've lovingly nicknamed the Grief Secretary. In addition to being an excellent family practice doctor and an amazing mother to 3 adult children of her own, she has been a strong and steadfast friend, not only to me, but to my family and our friends and our entire community. Stephanie was with us at the hospital the night of the accident, as her daughter Fern was with Cass. So Steph was also the first person I remember seeing in my house that next morning and every day after for weeks. So here we are 7.5 years later, and she's still here. She's actually in my dining room today. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So we're going to start right out by asking, what was it like for you watching this greatest heartbreak happen to your friend and your own family too, and the community? How have you experienced anything like that before? Have you felt that way with anyone else?
Definitely not. Have not experienced that before. As a family practice physician, I certainly have been with many of my patients and or families when they've lost somebody they loved, including children. But I have never experienced where, I was so close to the trauma of this loss, as well as something that just affected so many people and so broadly in our community. So this was the first time I had been intimately experienced something like this.
Yeah. How is it different, though?
It's very different. With patients, I feel a different kind of role, and I'm very comfortable with that role. With my resident physicians, I often give them tips of how do I help a family when they're with somebody who's actively dying, and that's probably usually my role with patients and families is I'm helping them when they make that decision to allow a peaceful death, such as hospice, or even if it comes as a surprise, we're there to support them through the death. This is different because this was obviously not expected whatsoever. Nobody could ever prepare for or expect something like this to happen. And my role was not just at that moment, whereas I think as a physician, a lot of times my role is really just at the moment. I will often send, a card to families within a year or something, another little follow-up phone call. But my role here felt very different. although I was able to tap into those experiences and what I have learned in being with families who've lost somebody, it was very different that this role was more not just for you and your family, but my family, many of my best friends and their families, and the whole community. And it was not just a few hours in a hospital room with a family.
Yeah. What are some of the lessons do you think you learned about the early grief? Those first days and weeks, what do you think you've learned being the grief secretary, if you will, for me and my family?
The biggest lesson is people need to be together. There's such this need of being with somebody else who understands what has happened. And that doesn't mean that anybody else can understand the family, but all the non-family members still also are experiencing some loss. So students need to be with each other, and parents need to be with each other, because they can't even imagine the grief that you as a parent went through, but other parents need to be together too. So I think one of the biggest things I learned is it really is important to give people a space to just be together. The other thing is that I think it's important to be around the grieving family. And, perhaps you can talk differently to this or agree or disagree, but there's a tendency for people to not know what to do or think they'll be in the way. How will they react? And especially in those first few hours or days, I actually thought it was important for people to stop by, even if there was not an opportunity to have direct conversation with the family, because there wasn't. You were in too much grief. But having that sense of a little bit of buzz going on, I think was important for everybody.
Yeah, and I think, Mom, maybe you can speak a little bit to this, but it's incredibly helpful. But looking back on it, I wish I could speak more cohesively about it, because looking back on it, there's so few memories that are tangible. It's just chaos instantly, whether there was 1,000 people or 10. There's no difference in my mind. Do you have any other thoughts, Mom?
Well, I was going to say, as Stephanie was saying, having people here, I don't have much recollection about it at all. I don't recall a lot that happened that first week. I do remember you being here, and I do remember a lot of people coming and going and asking a lot of me questions and things that I couldn't answer and decisions I needed to make. And I was actually very grateful that there was somebody here to be here, not only for me, but also for you, Colby, and for Dad. And my mom had shown up and friends. And so having you there to orchestrate all of that was really important.
I do think one of the lessons too is that it's helpful to have a few people in charge during that time because it is chaos. And there's such this draw for people to want to stop by and want to give a hug to somebody, even if it's not you. I remember many people stopping by and they never even went into the room that the family was in. Mm-hmm. But it was still important for them. So it was also nice, though, to have a few people in charge to say, she's in the other room, but here, come over here. Would you like a cup of coffee?
Yeah. And
if you happen to want to come out, you could get some hugs. If you weren't comfortable at that time, it still helped everybody. And I think it would be so lonely. I don't know, but I was trying to think about this the other day. I'm an introvert. You're an extrovert. Would I want all those people in my house, or would I want space? But then I realized you will always be able to get space. Nobody is going to think differently if you just needed to walk away and not come out of your bedroom for a few hours.
Yeah, the other important thing about that is that you can be surrounded by dozens and dozens of people and still feel so lonely because you're going through this journey really with your own feelings. And you're feeling
exactly.
Isolated.
And that was my thought. Is it seems like that having the people around would somehow ease is not even the right word. There's no word, but with that loneliness, it feels like it would be even more traumatic, probably more in hindsight, if there was nobody ever around during those several hours or days.
Don't you think, though, that some people probably would prefer that? Like you said yourself, you're an introvert. There are some people that would probably really prefer to not have people around. And you don't know that until you're there, by the way. You have no idea.
You don't know. And I think that was the other thing when you said what another lesson to learn is that you have to have flexibility and be able to have somebody that is close enough to the situation to notice, like, I think it's time to get everybody out of the house. Or recognize where, you know what, I think all this stuff setting out is bothering Monica or Randy, or, you know, some flexibility to say, let's shift gears here. Let's move people out, or maybe differently. It's like, hey, let's play a game, you know, which sounds kind of silly, but sometimes the opportunity may actually give some flexibility to do something that isn't full on out grief type of work. So it's flexibility too, and able to read the room and read the situation.
Yeah, I don't remember this, but I had a friend tell me, Stephanie even wrote a note in the door one day. Monica and Randy and Colby would rather not have visitors today. And that was just what they needed to know. So they didn't walk in the middle of whatever was happening. So I was wondering if you could give what your best advice might be to someone who asks, what do I even say to someone who has just lost a child? And a lot of people don't say anything. And I can tell you that's not the best answer to that question for me anyway. But yeah, what would you say to someone?
I think just saying, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I can't imagine your pain. And then just being there. Probably too many words is worse than a few words. And I would imagine that's what a lot of people try to do, is try to say things that then make it worse instead of just saying a few words about how you feel, to share, share thoughts of feelings for whoever you're talking to who's grieving. If you're in person, don't be afraid to touch, to admire, or talk about the memorabilia that's around. Very commonly, when somebody dies, people get out the photo albums, they put up posters. If it's a young person, there is even more. Cassidy's soccer uniform was out. There was all kinds of things around, which was wonderful. But even then, it's ask questions, or, oh, look at this. I always loved watching her play soccer. It's one of the tips I tell my resident physicians when they're not sure how to talk to a family when they're with somebody. I say, well, ask a question. Ask how many years they've been married. Ask what was his or her favorite activity to do. And the family will start talking and share with you about that person. So I think don't be afraid if you're in person to comment on, oh, what a beautiful photo of Cassidy is. How old was she in that photo? Tell me about that day. What were you guys doing? And then the conversation will flow. I think we hear time and time again, and it's true for the entire rest of your lives, but especially those first several days, just talk about her.
Yeah, any grieving parent will tell you just being able to hear her name is so important. It's very comforting. Why do I guess you kind of answered this, but, why was it so important to have the grief secretary? I thought it was really important not to have someone who is related to us, because they're just too close to make those difficult, heart-wrenching decisions. That I do remember. I remember sitting right at this table, actually, having lots of conversations about the funeral and the things that I wanted for us to remember about Cassidy, and very specific things that were important to me. So I think it was helpful that you could kind of separate yourself from probably how heartbroken you were for me and yourself, but to really help us make some important decisions.
Mainly, there's so much to do. I don't know how other families don't do that without somebody there to really just pick up those logistic pieces. Some of them don't even seem that important. Like, oh, when's trash day for this family? But other times are like, oh my goodness, talking about preparing for the funeral. I distinctly remember once we were sitting, we were talking about funeral plans, and I don't know if I asked you or you said it, but it was like, what are you going to wear? oh my gosh, we hadn't thought about what are you going to wear? And, you know, and we ended up actually laughing a little bit about what may have been or could have been, you know, a very difficult situation. You know, every single one of those decisions are so tragic in of themselves. But to take a burden off, I think knowing that somebody else is keeping some lists, they're communicating with other people. I think you're exactly right. It seems like it would be hard for somebody who's too close, because it needs to be somebody that is comfortable hearing, no, I don't want that, or please don't do that, and not take that personally when they're trying to help.
Right.
But also somebody who is just going to make some decisions. There were a couple of times in there too, I said, I'm just going to make this decision, and I'll tell Monica afterwards. And if she really doesn't like it, she'll let me know. But I think for the funeral home director, there was something like, you know what, just do that.
Yeah.
We'll worry about it later. But yes, just do that, or just do that, and making some decisions just to alleviate that. But there really is so much to do.
It is amazing when you think about how much is done in such a short period of time in planning. I mean, we plan lots of things here, our events and, you know, things that go on in our lives, that in marriages, and, you know, it takes so much time for preparation, and we pulled that off in less than 7 days.
It is
2 big services.
It is really incredible. And I think that's the other thing for all those other people. It's helpful for them to know who to call instead of you getting all the phone calls from the secretary at the high school. Stephanie, we were wondering about this. How do you think Monica would feel? From the funeral home director, from other community members. It also just fields a lot of the questions that they have. They want to do things, and they're not sure if they should run it by you or not. And so it's nice for everybody else to know, you know what, let's ask Stephanie. I know she's checking in daily, and she can help us figure out if we should do this or not, or she can talk to Monica about it.
Okay, what I really want to share with our listeners are thoughts and ideas on what to do when you don't know what to do. You're wringing your hands. Oh my gosh, how can I help someone? So we want to share some of the things that Stephanie and many of our friends and people in our community did. And as we say, you take the best and you leave the rest, but we want to share them with you. So let's get into some of those things. And you can maybe share some ideas with our listeners at what you did during that time.
One of the first things I did was communicate with everybody. I mean, literally at 6 a.m. when we got home, you know, from the hospital, laid down for a little bit, realized there was no sleep to be had, is I said, I need to let everybody know what really happened, because you also start to worry about rumors or whatnot. And so, you know, I emailed the soccer parents. I emailed the high school principal. I emailed the neighborhood community with just, you may have heard, but here is what happened, and here's where the Charettes are, and just, I will be heading over shortly. Please contact me further, or you'll hear from me further, just to kind of let everybody in the community know. And I think that was part of that kind of grief secretary right from the beginning, is let somebody step up and just say, okay, I'm just going to help people navigate this day. When I got here, and I don't know if somebody told me this, but I just figured I have to get a notebook. And so I found a notebook and put it out on the counter, just to write down when people called, left a message, food lists, to-do lists. If something would come up, we'd write it down and just have this big notebook of things going on. Part of it would be for you in weeks to come to look back and see who stopped by. So it was almost a little bit like a guest book. But a lot of it, I had pages where we were just making lists, like, oh, we ran out of milk, add that to the list. Because when the next person comes by and says, I'm going to the store, I know right then, oh, that's right, we need milk and butter and cereal and coffee, or, you know, whatever. So we had a shopping list, and we had another to-do list. As other things came up, people would ask questions like, I don't know the answer, let me add it to our to-do list. So a notebook full of anything you could think of, and it came up very quickly. I found noticed your calendar book, which is another kind of nice thing. If you are going to be around somebody in that first day especially, is get the notebook, but then also ask, do you have a calendar book? Let me take that and call the people that you might have been having appointments with. I took your phone and answered your phone.
You did.
So I did.
I don't remember that.
No. And you did. You had a few phone calls for some work appointments you had the next day. So I answered the phone calls for you so that you wouldn't have to, that first day or two before people would have heard, didn't have to answer a phone and answer a question to somebody who didn't know.
Goes on, right? I remember
Exactly.
I somehow remember. Did one of us have a dentist appointment? I feel like someone rescheduled.
You
something.
did. I rescheduled those.
Thank you.
I think that's part of that calendar is you had a senior picture because you were a photographer, so you had senior pictures of some people coming up that week. You had dentist appointments. Colby and Cassidy had a dentist appointment that week, and it's like, you know what? Let's just call that, and so you don't even have to think about that, or heaven forbid, get the reminder phone call. Automatic. Right. Cassidy's due for her screening, those type of things. So that's kind of the logistical things to look at. When people stopped by, we found we needed lots of water. So we would have coolers of water, right by the front door as people stopped by. Lots of tissues. So bring more tissues. Bring more toilet paper, especially the tissues, and have them everywhere. Almost giving permission for people to cry. There's tissues everywhere. You can cry. Organizing the visitors, putting signs outside. I do remember that a couple times we said, I put up a sign because you didn't want any more visitors, for that day or that evening. Or there was times you definitely wanted to see somebody. And so I would call that person and say, hey, today would be a really great time. Monica would love to see you today. And that's really nice for people to know directly too. And I encourage people to think about that in helping their grieved one who has no idea. But if all of a sudden you said, I would really love to talk to so-and-so, maybe today is the right time, then I could call them.
Yeah. And you recognize the dynamics in our family too, because, Randy, my husband, probably was overwhelmed sometimes with too many people. Or Colby, you were 15, so you were probably playing video games and you'd like to have some friends, to occupy your time. So my friends were really good about being respectful of everyone's needs.
When we think of the other things to do, there were, Cassidy was in multiple kind of elements of our community. So there was lots of opportunities in the community to do something for Cassidy. And I certainly didn't organize all those things, but it was, again, nice to have a contact person for them to talk to me. For example, at her elementary school, Mount Mercy, had the vigil. And for then also me to communicate to you. So, Monica, here's what's going to happen. I've talked to them at Mount Mercy. They're going to do A, B, C, and D. I know for you in particular, you really like to know what's going to happen, because the fear of that public, an unknown can be worse. So I could explain to you what's going to happen. The high school kids all had a vigil. I think we ended up recording it for you because you didn't feel comfortable going. But again, coordinating with them. There was, the soccer team, Cassidy's soccer team, had several different things they were doing to get together. And as you know, her coach was also, felt extreme grief too. She was very close to Cassidy and, of course, all the girls on the team. So I would try to help her as well and say, I think that's a great idea. She was worried about doing the wrong thing for you or for the girls. So many people were worried about doing the wrong thing. And I guess that'd be my advice. What could be the wrong thing if you're doing something to help somebody or support somebody?
Yeah.
And maybe do it and invite the family, but the family doesn't need to be there for it still to be very meaningful.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
So I think that was part of it too, is just do it.
Yeah, and actually Mom and I talked a little bit about that. We talked about how something with the right intention is so much more than nothing. And that minor inconvenience or anything that might be just a little off is so quickly overlooked just by the compassion that's felt with the intention of the act. It's so important just to be present and to do what you can in any capacity.
And I think my advice would be to people, you are going to say or do something that didn't land the way you would have ever intended it to do. I'm sure I did. And if you can think about it, I'd be interested in the feedback someday. But I think you should enter it with the idea that you will, because you are not and can never be in those shoes. Even if you've lost a child, you're not in those exact shoes. So you will say or do something that may not land the way you did, but it comes with that flexibility and being present. Mm-hmm. You might be able to notice that if you're there. It's like, oh, I just noticed the look. Did what I say? And you might be able to then repair it somewhat. Mm-hmm. Kind of redirect, or move on to bring back. I don't know, I'm not saying this very eloquently, but it's going to happen. I guess that's it. Know it's going to happen. Be prepared. That's not the end of the world, because I think, like you said, Colby, I just believe that the good intentions are going to be what's really going to last, amidst a few painful, wrong words said.
Exactly. So we talked about you also helped with all the funeral arrangements. Oh, my goodness. The one thing I do have in my possession and don't remember you doing was the jar that you put out at the service. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we planning the funeral, because like you said, how do people do this in just a couple of days amidst so much grief? But we do. Somehow it pulls together, and Cassidy had a beautiful service and memorial, beautiful church service and memorial service for all the high school to attend. But yes, we put a jar. Again, I think people want something to do. People want to do something. For you, for Cassidy, especially young people. At the high school, they had big banners, and the kids were just writing on them. All the local high schools, they would write messages and send them to Cassidy's high school to support everybody in the high school. So it was trying to think of something for people to do when they came. So we just had a big jar, and they wrote a message to Cassidy or to the family and put it in that jar. And it allows people to say something, kind of deeply that they would not say during a service. In some services, people do stand up and say something publicly. But most people are not comfortable with that. But they still have something important that they want to say. I remember I did that with the pets that I've buried. I asked all my children, took that very seriously about what would you like to say? Do we want to bury a message or bury a special toy? And they all, with two of our pets that we lost, and even just recently as young adults, they wrote messages and put it in. So it's something about giving directly to that soul.
It's good to share that too, that while this podcast is really designed intentionally for grieving parents and child loss, a lot of these things can apply to all losses and when you're grieving. So it's nice to share them. You also were I don't know how you found them, but we had plenty of Skittles at the memorial service.
Well, that is the benefit of having a grief secretary with lots of lists of people who said, that's my list to clean up the yard list. That's our clean up the house list. That's the I can't do anything but shop list. And so when we were thinking about the smaller little pieces of how we were going to decorate, or you were going to decorate, or how we were going to have the table, what would we give people who came? There were some bracelets, but Cassidy loved her candy, especially the Skittles, as you know, and you said, oh, we could give a little package of Skittles, and so I sent out a text, and I think within 2 hours we had probably 200 packages of Skittles. So like I said, people just want to help, and it's so nice to be able to think about concrete ways that do become very helpful.
Yeah. I also want to mention, too, that during, after the services, we had so many flowers sent to us, beautiful bouquets and arrangements. And at the end of the service, I don't know if it was you or someone that came to me, where do you want to bring all these? I mean, what do you do? And I just said, I think we should share them with places that Cassidy touched, the places where she served, the people who know her. And volunteers went right to work. They went everywhere, to the library, to the Humane Society, to Mount Mercy School, to the high school, everybody whose lives she's touched. And I just thought that was that's a good tip to share with other families.
Yeah, and I believe you delivered some of them, didn't you?
I think I did.
I think you did too, and that was a way, because you were uncomfortable kind of going out in public in those first few days. That was also a nice way for you to start maybe going to a few places. So again, a way for the family to start to reach out a little bit in ways that feel very safe, in comfortable and very meaningful ways too. Because it goes both ways. It's what can your friends do for you, but how do we also help you feel comfortable, stepping back outside.
Yeah, that took much longer than a week, but
yeah.
We had a very interesting, I don't know if interesting was a word, but a unique situation in that what happened to Cassidy was very public. And so a lot of people found out about the accident before we had an opportunity to tell them. And we also had lots of media personnel surrounding us, our house, and wherever we traveled. And so we also designated somebody to take care of that part of planning. Yes, absolutely.
I think that goes back to the idea. It's nice to think from an organized, have somebody help organize and delegate. And you're right, with this one, there was such a big media presence around it that the family absolutely had to be protected from. The children and close friends of hers needed to be protected from because it was an accident, and they were there. So it was very good and nice for us to be able to think and assign somebody and delegate that chore too. Yeah. And I would highly recommend that to anybody. We were a little fortunate because you and one of our best friends who took on that role actually has some skill in working with media. Many families would not, and I just think it could have been so tragic and hurtful and harmful for families without that kind of skill. So just find somebody else, let them run that interference, and manage it.
Yeah, it's good to have somebody that understands the intention of the media. It's not necessarily bad. It's just understanding how they work.
Yes.
How to serve them and also serve the family. You also helped with a lot of friends to create some annual remembrances. Do you want to share maybe some of those things? And again, these aren't what everyone would do, but they became really meaningful for our family.
Yeah, one of my favorite is the sidewalk chalk. It is absolutely one of my favorite, and this mainly because it turned out so amazingly beautiful, and so many people participated. But it's so simple, and that's what I love about things. They don't have to be intricate or difficult. And for Cassidy's birthdays, I believe when we first did it, but sidewalk chalk can take on a life of its own at any time. But on Cassidy's birthday, her first birthday that she was not with us, I just put a big box of sidewalk chalk at the bottom of your driveway and social media and texts, and sent out messages everywhere to say, hey, it's Cassidy's birthday, and please stop by and leave a message, for Cassidy on her birthday. And that's all. There was no direction. And we saw, it was so beautiful. I would just drive by a couple of times through the day and seeing old people, little kids, mostly high schoolers, all of her friends, and just sitting out there doodling. Some of them were intricate art pieces. Some of them were really emotional messages. And it was so, so beautiful. It was just absolutely beautiful. And I, witnessed some kids crying that hadn't cried at all or had an opportunity, because that would have been, a few months later. And as you know, grief never goes away, for anybody. But I think it's true for anybody, but sometimes in our society, it's like after the funeral, everybody goes back to school, back to work. You're alone, and everybody needs those opportunities, a safe place to say, why are you crying? well, I'm thinking about Cassidy, even if it is 8 months later. I want to cry today. But it was just beautiful. And I remember you came home and said, I hope it never rains.
Yes. That first birthday, Colby and I had gone away. And do you remember driving back? We pulled into the driveway and the light was on the driveway. We're like, what is this? It was so meaningful for us. And when I think about all those kids out there doing that, it was just so supportive for them. They need support as much as we do. The people who are grieving.
It was so meaningful for those kids to do that too, which I hadn't even anticipated. This was meant for something for you,
right?
But it was so meaningful for the kids.
Yeah, and it continued. By the way, it continued, and it still does. On different occasions. I mean, we've woken up to Easter morning where somebody did this beautiful cross on our driveway, and her birthday and other holidays, and just messages to us to say, we're still here.
I think that would be my number one. If you do nothing else, get some sidewalk chalk.
Yeah.
And because part of that too, that I was eventually going to segue into, like a lot of what you were able to do for us, and so many of the people that were close to our family were able to do for us, is so financially situated, and this is something that isn't, and is so therapeutic and has the ability to heal in so many different ways by bringing communities together and being able to express yourself in such a physical and tangible way. It was such a great way that people could show their and express their grief and help us to heal in our process.
I know that lives somewhere because I took a photo of every message, so I have all of the messages, but I think we videotaped it, and so it's a permanent memory for us now.
Yeah, it's like you said, the sidewalk chalk took on a life of its own because it gave a way for everybody forever to be able to do something. Anybody can just stop by and put a little sidewalk chalk message, publicly or privately.
Right.
There were little kids that just would draw a heart. That's the only thing they knew how to draw. But they're learning how to help and deal with grief, which we just do really poorly in our country.
I couldn't agree more. It's true. It's true. Thankfully, there's grief secretaries in the world. So you've also, with the help of Fern, was with Cass that night, helped create a really meaningful mentoring program. Again, doesn't cost a lot of money, just something to involve more people. I want to share about that. Yeah,
it's we call it Shine On Saturday, but yes, my daughter Fern was on the soccer team, and she was trying to think, as everybody is, they're wanting to think of ways to keep Cassidy's spirit alive or to honor her, and this was an idea that was Fern's idea, and then we helped her put it into reality. But it was that annually the high school soccer team, would have a Shine On Saturday day, a play day for the younger girls in the community to come meet the high school girls and just have fun and inspire them. And it seemed like the right thing to do. Cassidy was great with kids. She loved soccer. They called it Shine On Saturday. Because, Shine On Cass, it kind of became the mantra. And so this was Shine On Saturday. And again, it was something, when Fern was talking to me, is thinking about, well, what's something sustainable? There's lots of things that can happen right away and that you can do as a team together. And they did many things that first year without Cassidy, that for just the team. And we can talk about those too. But she was wanting something that would be more sustainable. And so we were talking about, would it be, a bench with her name on it, or a plaque, or something here or there. And we thought about those, and those would have still been meaningful. I think it is neat when you come across a plaque of somebody and you don't know the story, but it makes you think fondly of somebody. But she was looking for something that would be interactive and keep on going. So that was the idea that she came up with, was Shine On Saturday. And the team has done it, every year now. And we're getting far enough out now that there's girls on the team that definitely don't know Cassidy, may not even know her story, much about it. And that's okay, because we want the spirit to keep continuing. And for the girls to say every year, oh, are we doing Shine On Saturday? Because it'll still carry that spirit forward.
Yeah. Well, it's become a very meaningful event. We all look forward to it every year.
And that was something that Cassidy was just so good at, was taking her passions and creating an opportunity to serve her community and to help others around her. And so, of course, it'd be just fitting that Fern, your daughter, would do something just as similar, you know. And it's such a beautiful event, and I've been able to witness a few of them, and every single time I'm just, you know, so impressed and inspired by all the girls out there, like you said, who don't even know Cassidy, but are able to brighten the days of young girls and spread her story. And if they don't even know it, then they're still just doing what they can for their community in the ways that they know how.
Yeah, I think it also helps when we kind of go back to this idea that in America we don't do death very well or grief very well. I think even in 5 years, if a girl hears, oh, this is about a soccer player that was killed in an accident in high school, oh, that's so sad. And it is, but they won't really understand that. But they will see what kind of things you can do, moving forward. So it's just that it doesn't have to be lots of money. It doesn't have to be big, fancy memorials. It can be really what you do.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about just how important it is just to be with people in their grief. Like, you don't have to have the exact words. You don't have to do the right things, bring the right things, organize the right things. Sometimes you just need to be in the same space with someone.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's just be there. Again, probably a hard thing from Americans. We're all raised to do stuff. And I just got done talking about things to do for somebody. But the most important thing is to just be there, and not try, don't even pretend to try to fix something or solve something, because there is no fixing or solving that's going to be happening during this time. So just being there, trying to read the room. But I remember many days we just sat by your fireplace. Mm-hmm. And I just put another piece of wood on, and had a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And it was okay to just be quiet. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's really important for people.
Yeah.
As they struggle with the words, that sometimes you don't need any words at all.
Yeah, sometimes more words are not better. More words can be harder and more difficult. So just being present, and hugs, lots and lots of hugs, and that was really important too.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I do recall you dragging me outside many times too. You got to get outside, go for a walk. You need to feel the sun on your face. And we went for a cross country ski one time that I just cried the whole way, but you never said a word. We just kept moving on, and I needed that day.
I think nature is a necessary healer, and there's something different, I think, being outside when somebody's crying than being inside. So, sitting across the table while somebody's crying is harder than out on a walk, and somebody wants to cry while they're walking or cry while they're cross-country skiing. I think it's different for the person who's supporting them. It's more comfortable. And there's something about being out in nature. It's more of a healing,
absolutely,
kind of a cry too. So I think getting outside and we did it in places where you would not be around other people, because that was really important. And I can absolutely see why. I think I would be the same way, but let's just get outside and get some sunshine. We can turn around.
Right.
Well, in just another half mile, we'll turn around.
Yes, my walks with you were never as short as we first anticipated, but it was all good. There are lots of practical things, I think, and when people are grieving, I can only imagine that there are some people that Google this. How am I going to help somebody? What are the practical things I can do? What do you think what some of those things are? I mean, they seem obvious, but maybe we should share them on this podcast too.
No, absolutely. The work around the house, again, don't ask, just do it. It was the fall. There were leaves everywhere. And so, I just called somebody and said, hey, can you get a group of guys and come take care of the lawn for Randy? And we didn't ask. We just did it. Things like that. When people stop by and say, can I do something? Can you clean the kitchen? Mm-hmm. Can you do the dishes? I think we actually went and found a cleaning lady at that time.
You did, because there were so many people here all the time.
And there were so many people here. And so it's like, let's clean the house. Can somebody just go clean the bathrooms today? Those are, even if you aren't sure if it needs it or not, just do it. Yeah. So some of those practical things, checking the fridge, is there some food here, especially if there's other kids in the house, making sure that there's food around. Yes, we did a meal train, and that's helpful, but I know sometimes that's hard for families too because there's lots of extra food. So keeping an eye on that. If the food is sitting around, get it out of the house. They ate what they were going to eat, and now it's a burden. So looking for those, thank you for the food, but then somebody who's also getting rid of the extra foods, keeping fresh fruits and vegetables around. With the shopping, I think we already talked about tissues. Don't, heaven forbid, ever run out of Kleenex or tissues, toilet paper, waters.
And so I think an interesting point about sort of your role in our experience is that society has changed in a lot of ways. We've just been through and are still going through a global pandemic. And one of the most interesting facets of this pandemic is that we've recognized we have the capacity to do so much more from home and from a distance. And so what are some ways in your mind that you think that you can be distant and still support the people around you through some of these times?
That's a great question, because so many of the things that I think were important when we went through this were physical. Just stopping by and giving a hug, but never saying a word, or just stopping by and taking the trash out, or just being present. And with more isolation now, either out of preference or necessity, I think it lends it to even a higher level of creativity. Send a card. I remember Monica all of you got so many cards. And we would sit and go through them. That was another thing to do when we were just sitting there. It's like I would just go through cards with you. And some of them you'd be ready and sometimes you wouldn't, but you didn't mind other people looking through them. And I remember thinking back of friends that I haven't seen for years that have had loss, and I thought about them and I prayed for them, but I didn't send a card. And I'm sure they didn't miss that, but they certainly probably would appreciate it. And I remember Monica saying, I haven't talked to this person for 15 years, and they sent me a card. That meant so much. So I feel, this shame of like, all those times I could have sent a card to somebody. It is meaningful. So sending the messages, several people did things anonymously. Some of them were kids. We could tell by just the way they left it at the doorstep, like a little flower or a little candle or a picture. And we didn't know who they came from. Sometimes they said who they were. Sometimes they didn't. No thing is too small.
There's been a lot of that too, I want to say. A lot of that over the years, not just this is more focused on the beginning, but through the last 7.5 years, we have so many anonymous things that show up at our house that bring us so much joy and comfort. And of course we want to know who it is, but there's even a bigger part that's comforting knowing that it doesn't matter who it is. It's several people probably would have loved to have sent the same sentiment. So, and that's how we take it.
I think sending pictures or videos or messages, I think about that if I'm going through old pictures and I find a picture of Cassidy. I remember it's like, oh, I wonder if they've seen this picture. You may not have. And Monica, you're a photographer, so you have lots of photos of Cassidy, but there's still something different about, I have never seen that photo and that expression or that look
memory.
Or that memory. And you want every single one of those. So, if you come across a picture or a note she wrote or something like that, share it. Just share it.
And that was something actually that Mom and I did for a long time. Right after her death, is we had a journal that we would exchange between each other, and each entry would be an opportunity to share a memory that we had of Cassidy. And as you said, read the room, know who you're with. And so sometimes there is an aspect of time you want to let maybe some pass before you launch in with your story every once in a while. But now that there's been almost too much time, I welcome anybody's opportunity to talk about Cassidy, to ask questions or to share their own experiences, because it only brings me so much joy. It's no longer a conversation about her death as it is a celebration of her life.
Yeah, I just came across, cleaning my basement, I had a box of notes from my best friend in high school who passed away at the age of 20, I think. And I said, oh, I should give these to her sister. And so I delivered them to her sister. What are we, 30 years later. And she said she just had so much fun seeing, and of course, this was when Monica and I were in high school, so these were handwritten. So to see her handwriting and to read how she wrote to me, and it was just this like blessing 30 years later of, oh, it's a bit of her that I haven't seen yet.
I do hear that a lot from other lost moms who I've unfortunately have become very close to over the last several years. But they say anyone that reaches out to them with a memory of their child keeps the spirit alive. And that like the greatest thing that you could ever do for someone is to share your memory. We talked about just the important dates, the birthdays, the anniversary, which I hate that word, of the person's passing, and what's your best advice on that?
I think it's important to, again, help people find something to do. Sometimes they're looking for it and they're thinking about you, but just don't know how to do something. Sometimes maybe they have forgotten, and that's so sad. But then it reminds them, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing Mother's Day in a way that my friend doesn't. In the first year, especially, so for example, on Mother's Day, I think I put a big vase down at the bottom of the driveway, and I just asked everybody to drop a flower in, pick one from your own garden, or just grab a flower, your favorite flower, and you ended up with a huge bouquet, from everybody else that, you're a mother to. For Father's Day, we did something for Randy. I think a can of beer or a bottle of beer. I think we put a cooler down at the bottom and said, hey, everybody just drop off a bottle or a can of beer for Randy on Father's Day, and with a little note that we're thinking of you. The birthday, of course, her birthday we did the sidewalk chalk. Although continuing on, a lot of some of the kids have come up with these ideas, and I think that's part of, we taught them that. So I know on Cassie's birthday in social media, people now, I think every year still do, I'm eating dessert first. And they post a picture, and maybe none of their other friends now off in college or other part of the country know what they're talking about. But, you see that, we know what that means. So just they're going to eat their ice cream and share their post on those days. On the anniversary of the death, again, just something. And I think that was a harder one to navigate. And for you too, because I think I talked to you about what do you want, and that's just so hard for you as a family member to. I remember it's so hard for you, but at the same time, we couldn't imagine it just going on without something. Right. We did ice cream with the soccer team at the soccer game. I think we brought ice cream, and after the game, everybody came over and had some ice cream. I think the first year or two we had got like the Dairy Queen to have an eat dessert first, and donated some proceeds to.
A lot of our focus on that actual day has been service to our community, but that's us. That's not necessarily for everyone. But that first year we were out to the farm helping build Cassidy's kitchen.
Yep, that was
And we've done other things. We've made meals for the homeless shelter. Yeah. We've done things for the animal shelters. Yeah. So for us, it was doing the work that Cassidy would have done. That's our focus.
I think on the anniversary of a death, it was like, let's think of something good. Let's think of something that's only goodness to do today. Yeah. The first Christmas, I remember our whole neighborhood gathered at the Humane Society, and which was closed on Christmas, but they let us come in and we cleaned, and we had so much fun. Yeah. And laughter and joy, and pets got adopted that day. But that first Christmas, we were all like, "What do you do? Well, let's just go hang out with the animals," and that was a great way to spend that first difficult Christmas.
Oh, it's very meaningful that a family would put aside their traditions to support another family. That's so huge, so huge.
And so this might be going a little more broad in scope, but we're speaking about practicality and things of that matter. So, Steph, when I think of you in particular, I think qualities that you have. I think of like empathy and wisdom, and you have strength, so much strength, not only in your character but physically too. You're incredibly fit, and there are just so many aspects to you as a person that not only qualify you as a friend and this sort of grief secretary, as we're putting it, but in this instance, who qualifies as a grief secretary? How do you pick that person? How did you become that person for us? Was there anyone in those moments maybe that was also entering into that space and you had to have conversations? Who gets elected as the grief secretary?
We had a very stringent nomination process. It just kind of happened, although I do distinctly remember. I remember the morning after the accident, and I remember thinking to myself, I need to get over there. They need me, the community needs me. I was starting to get phone calls at home from neighborhood people, and I remember thinking, I need to go over there. More like I have a responsibility. I need to be the one there to help kind of get this. People were turning to me. And then it felt right. I have thought about this though, if you don't have somebody naturally that falls in that situation, or now that would be my advice, is to actually find somebody and say, can you please play this role for me? Just like you would other major events, you might find somebody's like, listen, I'm going to be busy. I need you to be in charge of the master schedule or whatever. That I think it's really important to name somebody that has the right skills for it. And organization, somebody who is his organization, who knows how to communicate with people, reach out to people. It'd be more helpful if they know a lot of people and people know them in this role. I don't remember who coined the term. It was either Monica or I, but I actually had the whole next week off. I was supposed to be leaving town, but I didn't, obviously. But so I actually had the time, which in of itself is a little unusual in our society. But I actually had 10 days off, and I kept them off, and I just came over every morning. And, I think I came over one morning, I opened up we literally had a notebook, the whatever stenographer notebook, open it up and said, okay, your grief secretary is here. What's on task today? And it became our joke in the morning, and that we would actually have a laugh in the morning, that, okay, I'm here. And like, okay, what do we got to do today? And he'd be like, okay, today we have to make that decision about, I don't want to do it, but we have to. And, so it allowed us to really dive in to sensitive topics and issues, because we treated it as a responsibility. And it gave us, we could laugh about it. I know it's crazy, and sometimes we even felt guilty laughing the first week. But we did. I could come in and I'd get sometimes she'd come downstairs and I already had my own coffee, and I said, yeah, I'm a good secretary.
You're the best secretary.
And also a primary care physician, which I think assists you oftentimes in how you were able to do this task. And so this also might be a tad bit off topic, but I was just curious, to what capacity do primary care physicians seek to assist in the grief process? And also, obviously you have a daughter that's currently in medical school, and so maybe she hasn't reached this yet, but maybe you can speak a little to the education or just sort of the process there. And, we talked a little bit about how, America and the Grief Society. And so regardless of what should your primary care physician be doing for their patients in the process of grief?
I think they're one of the most important people. I do full spectrum primary care, which means for many of my patients, I deliver them, I take care of them, well into their years or at different stages or their families. And I think the primary care physician is the ideal person there to help somebody navigate through the end of their life. I especially think about it through end-of-life care, which is the other part that we don't do very well in America, is knowing it's here, recognizing it's here, and doing the best thing for our loved ones so that they can have a peaceful death. And the primary care physician is ideal for that. And I think it's harder these days because so much is segregated. We have hospitalists taking care of people when they're in the hospital. We have palliative care specialty, which is an incredible specialty, but not everybody needs to see a palliative care specialist when they're dying. It's a natural part of life that every single one of my patients will experience. So I think it's especially important to help prepare families for death and help them through death. There's probably more we could do with the grief process, though, too. And I learned this from one of my my teachers years ago is he would actually put it on his calendar when a patient died, 6 months down the road, send a card to patient A's family. And it was really meaningful to the families to hear from the primary care doctor. So there's so much more opportunity for all of us.
Yeah. Well, this is just such an important conversation to have. It's so broad that we have talked about doing a part 2 of this conversation. So I think we'll leave that where we are today. And let me just say that I'm so grateful to have you as my friend and my grief secretary, because I would not be here today without you.
Thank you. It was my honor and my pleasure. And Colby, it just popped in my mind, relevant to what you just recently asked, is it's a hard thing to do. And it was hard. And there were some mornings I was like, it's like, I need to go over there. And I never regretted it when I got here. But there were people who said, this is too hard for me to go over there all the time. And it is hard. And it is hard. And everybody deals with grief differently, and that's okay too. And that is absolutely okay too. But it's like looking for that person who can be amidst pain like that and just stay. And it doesn't mean that somebody who can't do it is doing anything wrong. It's different for everybody.
And, just while I have the moment, I want to say thank you so much for everything that you've done, really. And I'm sure I'll say this again in the next episode. And all those attributes and more, really, that I listed off earlier: the strength, empathy, compassion. And one of the most interesting ways that I got to know you was just simply through the ways in which that you assisted my family, my mom and my dad. And, as a child, there's so much that you feel like you have to do, but seeing your parents in so much grief is very difficult. And I can't believe that they had somebody like you to assist them in this process. And it meant the world to me and my family. So thank you.
As long as you love.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please share our link with others and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. I'm Monica Charette, reminding you that you are never alone in your grief. Until next time, we'll be right here with you, holding the light.
As long as you love.